r/indieheads, album discussion, The Strokes, The New Abnormal. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more added music content. This is definitely way better than I was expecting from The Strokes in 2020. Glad to hear that they still have a great album in them. I went in with pretty neutral expectations and think it's a great album. Easy to listen to and has a nice flow. It didn't hit me emotionally or in any particularly compelling way that makes me love a record, but it's definitely impressive they could make something so cohesive after nearly 20 years. I'll admit that I've never been that into The Strokes. I know and like the hits, but I've never sat down and listened to an album front to back, but a friend told me I had to listen to this. I like it quite a bit actually, especially the back half. There's something about Julian's voice that just cuts to my soul, especially in At the Door and Ode to the Myths. I guess I should listen to their other records now. The Adults Are Talking is a top 5 to 7 Strokes song I know. I can't stop listening to it. So glad I held out for the studio version. It's a special song. I actually enjoy the live version more. I probably should not have listened to it so much. Are you not entertained? Is manually inserted by me now as I listen. Why is nobody talking about Selfless? Best track in my opinion. It's funny listening to an album without knowing what the singles are, because I went into this without even knowing there was a new Strokes album until the day it dropped, and I immediately assumed that Selfless must have been one of the lead singles. That's my absolute favorite track, and I was very surprised to see it barely get mentioned anywhere. Honestly, the singles are my least favorite tracks on the album, and I'm not saying that to be a contrarian. They just don't do as much for me as the other tracks. They're all great though. For real. The vocals are sublime. It literally soothes my ears. Here's a copy of my initial impressions from another post I made. The Strokes have always been defined, for better or worse, by their iconic first 2 albums. Those albums catapulted the band straight to the saviors of rock status in the early 2000s. However, that reputation wasn't sustained through their next 3 records, which were nowhere near as successful. In my opinion, the first 2 albums sounded very similar, and after some inter-band drama they decided to break the mold of the first 2 albums with different styles. Some people like bands that have a consistent sound, but I'm of the mindset that bands should change with time. So here we are 7 years later, and my big question going into this album was how much have they changed? Well, they changed a lot. All of the songs still have that distinct Strokes sound with the sexy double guitar, catchy lyrics, and groovy bass, but each song has its own unique style which gives the album an incredible variety of sounds that none of their other albums have even attempted to achieve. There are certainly some songs that sound like they're inspired by other albums in the Strokes catalog, but even those songs have a fresh style about them that make them so much more than just a journey through the band's past. This album is a bold step into the future for the band, and you can really feel all the creativity that they built up over the years. My friend asked me if this is my favorite album by them, and I really had to think hard to try and look past my hype. The first 2 albums are so iconic that saying The New Abnormal tops them is a statement that I'm not quite ready to make just yet. I can safely say that I like this album more than their last 3 though. The best way I can put it is that this is exactly the album I wanted to hear from the Strokes. If they had come out with an album with the same style as their first 2, I would be a bit disappointed. After 7 years, I wanted to hear a fresh take on what defines the Strokes sound, and this album 100% delivers on that. I remember hearing that Julian Casablancas considers the Strokes to be classic rock. Their best stuff came out in the early 2000s, and a lot of artists have taken inspiration from them. They sort of defined a generation of music, and maybe they couldn't top what they've already done. This became increasingly true with Angles and Come Down Machine. Those 2 just aren't as well liked as their first 3 albums. I also heard once that the Strokes sound has become so well defined and so specific that they couldn't make a new album without really fine-tuning it. I'm pretty sure that's why Julian Casablancas made The Voids. It's sort of the musical equivalent of an artist making wonderful drawings and paintings, and then suddenly scribbling and doodling all over the page to release some excess energy. And if he made those 2 Voids album under the Strokes name, then he'd risk ruining his reputation. With all of that in mind, The New Abnormal is a good record. It throws away the notion that the Strokes stopped being good after first impressions of Earth, and is coming from a guy who enjoyed Angles. Bad Decisions is the most Strokes sounding Strokes song I've heard in a while. The Adults Are Talking is a great intro track, and Ode to the Mets is a phenomenal closer. And those are only 3 tracks out of others that are really great. The only one that I haven't really enjoyed is Eternal Summer. But maybe it'll grow on me. The album is good, and I'm happy that the Strokes are still worthwhile. I was surprised by how much I liked it. The Adults Are Talking and Brooklyn Bridge to Chorus have quickly become 2 of my favorite Strokes songs. My 2 gripes are: 1, I actually don't like the production. I love how clear Julian sounds, don't get me wrong. Everything is the same amount of loud. It all feels kind of anesthetized and squeaky clean to me. I really love Why Are Sundays, except that the guitar constantly in the left ear kills me when I listen in headphones, to a point where I almost find it unlistenable, which is a bummer, because otherwise it would be up there with my top favorites. And 2, I find the frequent blatant borrowing from other artists a little lazy, especially since they are more than capable of coming up with something new. I'm not saying it doesn't work on the songs, but I think Bad Decisions is actually the weakest song for me on the album, because I spend the whole thing being reminded of what other songs it also is. Just to reiterate before the fans come for me, I still really like the thing, and it's been super fun to see them getting along once again. I had high expectations since last year when I found out they drop a new album this year. I know it's a controversial topic, but I absolutely loved the Come Down Machine when it came out. My expectations were even higher when the teaser tracks dropped. At the Door is an instant favorite. After all this foreplay, it is needless to say the album didn't have an easy job with me, but upon first listening I really loved it. The songs hit me and left a deep impact. Selfless is my top choice of the whole thing. If you didn't have the same experience, I recommend you give it a second try whilst driving or traveling. 1. The Adults Are Talking retro drum loop grows into a fun rhythmic melody that turns into a lead guitar sing-along. It vaguely sounds like the Strokes covering a Sparks song, which is awesome. 2. Selfless, a haunting kaleidoscope-esque soft ballad, similar to some of the tracks on Come Down Machine. 3. Brooklyn Bridge to Chorus, jabby synths over a Peter Hook-like bass line with typical jangly Strokes guitar work. It's a good mix of element. 4. Bad Decisions, sounds like I Melt With You by Modern English until Julian starts singing over it. 5. Eternal Summer, tropical Vampire Weekend sounds meets dark synth. Vaguely reminds me of that last Paramore album, but on Quaaludes and more cocaine. 6. At the Door, a big 90s EDM synth played with one hand that grows into another sad dark ballad. 7. Why Are Sundays So Depressing, another Strokes ballad decorated with synth sounds. 8. Not the Same Anymore, guitar ballad with some slow motion Carlos Santana solo work. 9. Ode to the Mets, damn song bait and switched me. It started with a slow half-tempo synth pulse that reminded me of Crash Course in Science's It Costs to Be Austere, and then just fades into another ballad. I liked the album. It's not a hit factory, but it works brilliantly as an album. Its pacing is similar to Come Down Machine, but with a more synth-driven arrangement. I feel like synth has become a pejorative term for retro pretension, but the Strokes really use the synths well, opting for more of Sparks or Japan vibe, rather than the tropey New Order or Depeche Mode references that most people with keyboard try to ape. Put this on expecting nothing much, having been disappointed by the Strokes consistently for nearly like 15 years. But this is really good. Julian's voice is great, there are nice melodies everywhere, and most importantly it sounds great. Fantastic production. I feel like weak production and mixing has always kind of fucked the Strokes over. Post Is This It? Like, even Room on Fire doesn't sound as good as the songs deserve it to. It also weirdly feels fresh. Like, obviously it's massively indebted to post-punk still, but the post-punky guitar noodles and synths are way more in line with the kind of post-punk I enjoy compared to like the earnest, broody, politically drenched gloom fests that other bands who have mined that era in the last couple of years have put out. It also sounds like they had fun making this. Love the little bits of studio banter here and there. After a handful of listens, I'd put it as their best since Room on Fire, but not by a wide margin. The first half hits all of the notes I want, a mix of the old, poppy sound with some new flourishes thrown in. The second half is fine, but I think I pretty clearly want those catchy pop/rock jams from this band at this point. More good songs, and Nothing Bad puts it above most of their albums. It is more than I expected from them at this point, although if I am being totally honest, the singles had me hyped. The disrespect on first impressions of Earth in this thread, and in general, is just too much for me to handle. Nothing on this 2.5. 1. Forbinenzer album even touches You Only Live Once, Heart in a Cage, Juicer Barks, Razor Blade, Electric to Space, Eyes of the World, Evening Sun or Red Light. Get real. Thanks for watching, fellow music lovers. Like and subscribe for more Did Music posts, and let us know in the comments if there are any music related threads you'd like posted. Don't forget to wash your hands.